When we're isolated, when we have no community to lean on, that can really intensify stress, and that can lead to us feeling lonely, and that can often make us feel helpless. So being part of a supportive community is really vital, and it's really important when we think about reducing stress, because it provides us emotional support, practical help, and that sense of belonging, which is deeply wired in us. That is not a bad thing. That is actually a good thing. It's part of our wiring as human beings. Hello everybody, welcome back to Travel Light. It's your friend Dr. Unama. Hope you guys are doing amazing. For my new friends, I am Unama. I am a doctor, a psychiatrist based in sunny Glasgow, Scotland, and more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, I am a child of God. I'm a follower of King Jesus, and I have just come to understand, still learning, thank God, how much he cares about us. And I know that this love, this care, this affection extends to our hearts and our minds. I believe that the Lord is deeply invested in our mental and emotional health and wants us to thrive in that arena. And so here at Travel Light, we're exploring what it looks like to give God access to that space. We are on a quest to live the abundant life that he promised us. So welcome back. And if you haven't yet, can I just ask you to take a second to hit that subscribe button, guys? It just means that every time I've got content out, you're the first to know, and you never miss a thing. So you never have to have FOMO, y'all. Yeah. And more importantly, guys, I really am on a mission to build a community around this. I want us to grow together, to thrive together, and so that no one's left behind. So join me, y'all. And if you do like this video, and even if you don't, please just like the video, like hit the like button and share with a friend who you think will benefit from what we have to discuss today. So how are you guys doing? I am feeling really rejuvenated, really refreshed. I really am grateful for the opportunity to travel back to Nigeria for a couple of weeks. It was wonderful. A family member was getting married, and I got the opportunity to travel to Ghana as well. So yeah, so 2 different African countries in 1 year is a blessing. I am really grateful for that. Thank God for weddings, because that's the reason why I have visited these 2 countries. And yeah, that was my other West African country. I've been to Benin Republic once for like a day, ages ago, so that doesn't count. So Ghana was lovely. People were very nice, very polite, very laid back. People said please for everything, which is wonderful. You had yes please and thank you please, and even no please. So even when you were rejected, it was done with a smile and with politeness, which is great. I have to say though, on the jollof rice war, sorry, Nigeria wins hands down. I had some Ghana jollof rice. It wasn't jollof rice. It was something. It wasn't jollof rice though. Sorry guys, we win that one. But otherwise, it was a wonderful trip, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So hope you guys have had a good summer. We're coming to the end of summer now, if you want to call what we've had summer, but grateful nonetheless. And as you know, guys, we have been chatting about stress for what seems like forever now, but I'm so grateful for all the comments. Thank you for encouraging me and letting me know that the content we're putting out has been helpful. Thank you so much. In the last episode, we talked about the power of forgiveness when it comes to managing stress. We spoke about how when you hold on to resentment and unforgiveness and bitterness, even if you feel justified, you are causing real damage to your body and to your mental health, because you're compounding stress. It's not worth it. So I wonder, have you been applying this to your life? Whew. I know I've been thinking about people that I really need to let go of, and I've been praying and allowing myself to let things go, allowing God to move in that area and enjoy the peace that is available to me. So I want to just encourage you to keep at it. Forgiveness can be a process, so keep going at it. So today we're going to be turning our attention towards the importance of community and support in managing stress. Now, one of the big lessons I am learning, I'm always learning, right, is the power of community. I am very much my husband says I'm too individual, I'm too independent. He's probably right. But I very much have learned how to get things done on my own. And very often I find myself neglecting the importance and the power of community. And so let's do this together. Thinking about God's way and thinking about what the Bible teaches us. we know that God has designed us for connection. And that connection is for himself. So intimacy with him and intimacy with others. So it's like this vertical and horizontal dynamic. And we see this in the creation story with Adam and Eve. God had created all the amazing bounty of the earth, the trees and the clouds and the skies and the sun and the moon and the stars and all the wonderful animals, and then puts Adam in it. So everything Adam needed was here in the Garden of Eden. But in the midst of all this beauty and awe and wonder, God acknowledged that it wasn't good for Adam to be alone. He commented, yeah, we need to create a partner for Adam, and he creates Eve. And we learn from that even if we have all of what the earth has to offer and we have God himself, he still wants us to be in community. He still wants us to have healthy, strong relationships with people around us, particularly those within the family of faith. We read in Ecclesiastes 4:9-12 that says that two are better than one. Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of three strands is not quickly broken. So whether we acknowledge it or not, guys, the need for connection is deeply wired in our being, in our DNA. So you wanting healthy friendships, you wanting a healthy relationship with your spouse, you wanting to just be known and to be seen and to offer that to other people is not pathological. That is actually a really natural and, dare I say, holy need. And connection plays a role in the way our brains function, our emotional well-being, our physical health, the way our minds work, and in the way we develop from a psychosocial perspective from childhood to adulthood. So very, very important. And when we think about stress, guys, when we are isolated, when we have no community to lean on, that can really intensify stress, and that can lead to us feeling lonely, and that can often make us feel helpless. So being part of a supportive community is really vital, and it's really important when we think about reducing stress, because it provides us emotional support, practical help, and that sense of belonging, which is deeply wired in us. That is not a bad thing. That is actually a good thing. It is a need. It is part of our wiring as human beings. And there is wealth of evidence that has consistently shown that when we have strong social connections, it can improve our mental health, it can reduce stress, and even can impact on your longevity. That's right. If you want to live long, have a good family life, have good social structure. So there is a really interesting study published in Psychoneuroendocrinology, a publication, and found that individuals with strong social support had lower cortisol levels in response to stress, which indicated that community, having those kind of relationships, can buffer the effects of stress on the body. This again suggests that being connected to others can directly influence the biological stress response. So every time I talk about this, guys, have that picture in your mind, guys, about your brain, your adrenal glands, the cortisol thing, your adrenaline, noradrenaline. Have that in mind as I'm talking about that. So in terms of support systems, guys, there are different ways people can support us, and there are different ways we can lend support to others. Emotional support, just being there to listen, being that person that people can talk to, or having somebody to talk to. Practical support. So being able to delegate things are too complex for us, are too overwhelming, particularly if we're going through transition periods. Spiritual support as well, having prayer partners who can be there for you. And we see in the scriptures that having support is vital. So remember that story in the book of Moses where the Israelites were in battle. I can't remember who they were fighting, but I believe it was in Exodus 17. And Moses was overwhelmed, being the leader of, dare I say, a very difficult nation. I love how every time we think about Israelites in the Bible, we're like, oh, these people are so ungrateful, when it's just us, right? But anyway, being the leader of that and having the pressure of a battle on you as a leader. And the Bible tells us how every time Moses' hands were coming down, were falling down because he was tired, then the Israelites would be losing. And then his friends, his support system, his family recognized this and understood that if they were to hold up his hands, if they were to support him and keep his hands up, actually, everybody would win. So they lifted his hands up, and once his hands were up, Israel eventually won that battle. So amazing. This illustrates the importance of us having others to help carry our burdens. This is not just a physical thing, this is a very deeply spiritual thing as well. And even Jesus Christ, being fully God and fully man, we've talked about this when Jesus was going through the passion, in the beginning of the passion, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. And of course, Jesus is aware of what's about to happen. He's aware of this. And there's this external pressure coming towards him. You know, he's fighting the temptation to flip out, to become anxious. And Jesus asks Peter, James, and John to stay awake and pray with him during this intense period of anguish, right? Before the crucifixion. So Jesus himself wanted some support. So who are we not to need it? So we all need somebody. And, you know, I try and keep it real in this podcast. This is an area of weakness for me because I am so prone to just powering through and getting things done on my own. So I'm speaking to myself, guys, not coming for anybody at all. So before we move on, guys, can you identify your support system? Are there people, as I'm talking to you, that you can actually like think about and you nod and smile and you're grateful for, like, wow, yeah, they are there for me when I need them? Or, I mean, can you think of yourself being a support system to other people? Let's just think about that as we're having this conversation. So I know that this is something that I really need to pay attention to, something that the Lord has pinpointed for me, certainly. So we know from multiple studies and even from observation that isolation is a very dangerous thing. Do you know that the statistics currently state that 1 in 4, that's 1 in every 4 older person, is experiencing social isolation? And this is really important because we are now living in an aging population with medical treatments and therapies becoming much more advanced and much more effective. People are living older for longer, and, you know, and they may be frail, but they're living longer. But the problem now is a lot of people are experiencing, you know, a lot of loneliness. And with our adolescents, our teenagers, between 5 and 15% are experiencing loneliness, which should bother us because, guys, we are in this age where it's all about connectivity. We're always, you know, the things that we do and the technology that we have would suggest that we are never alone, right? But 15% of our teenagers feeling lonely is super shocking, I would say. In 2023, the WHO, the World Health Organization, they acknowledged that social isolation is a pressing threat to global health. So really important. And when we dive deeper into isolation and how that affects stress, we know this from having observed and from studies that without social support, stress can increase, and that can lead to disorders like depression, anxiety, and also can impact on your body, and you can develop physical health problems. Isolation is also linked with obesity, with stroke, and with heart disease as well. And, you know, reflecting on the COVID era, you know, think about all we had to endure in that time, the lockdown measures with remote working, social distancing. I have to say, I put my hands up. I wasn't always the most compliant with all the measures because sometimes I found them so stringent. I understand that they were deemed to be necessary at the time. I remember, for example, one day, although social distancing was, you know, being phased out at this point, it wasn't being enforced so much. But I remember I believe it was in Tesco. I went to Tesco for grocery shopping. And, you know, my usual nature is if I see somebody that I haven't seen in a while, somebody I know, my natural reaction is to reach out for a hug or offer a hug or whatever. So I'm walking down the aisle and then somebody I knew is walking towards me. And then, you know, I'm like, oh my goodness, so good to see you. And then I like offer a hug and this person nearly pushed me down. I was like, oh my gosh. And I had to just not be offended because people were just so scared, you know, of what was happening. And later on, they told me that, you know, they had family that was unwell, and they were concerned that if they touched anybody, hugged anybody, you know, God forbid, they would catch COVID and then, you know, pass it on to their unwell family member. But that is how bad things were. So people out of fear were really isolating themselves. And of course, I'm not coming for anyone and not judging anyone. It was a really tricky period. We know also that in that era, there was a surge in mental health issues. And, we saw more of anxiety and depression and even saw other stress related issues. And yeah, the long-term effects of COVID and things are still being studied. But what we know so far is that the emotional and psychological effects of that level of isolation and loss of connection, especially physical connection with other people, will likely persist for a while. And another thing, working in my field is that we found that people with pre-existing mental health conditions like say schizophrenia, depression, bipolar were especially hard hit, and also people who were elderly, because you remember we had to basically isolate people in nursing homes. They couldn't be visited by their family. Very, very tricky time. But I'm saying all this to highlight what happens when people are isolated. Obviously, that was an extreme situation. But again, highlighting that the isolation is not just a case of, they have nobody. It can have really profound effect on your physical and mental health. And from a spiritual perspective, guys, being isolated can weaken you spiritually. The Bible knows, the Lord knows what he was saying when he said we should not neglect the gathering of the brethren. When we are not around each other, people to encourage you to keep going, encourage you to, go deeper in the Lord. Not only are you likely to not progress and you just kind of stay in the same position, you're probably going to go back the way, and as we call it, backslide. So God is very keen on us maintaining community and fellowship, not just for our mental health and physical health, but also for spiritual health as well. We know that when people are in prolonged isolation, research has shown that they're likely to, that is likely to have an impact on chronic stress and its associated health problems. And research has shown that social support acts as a buffer against these effects, helping to regulate your cortisol and reduce the physical toll of stress. So, how do we break out of isolation? Because I have to say that, for example, after COVID and the COVID era, going back to being social was a bit challenging. I found that it didn't happen. I had to be very intentional about breaking out of that routine of just being by myself all the time. And even now, I have to say, like, I still very much enjoy my company. It's really bad. Like, I can be by myself for a week and I don't think I would bother too much. And I don't know that that's a good thing. But little tips, guys. We can join small groups. We can reach out to a friend. We can even volunteer. And just to say, seeking help or support, I know it's going to sound very twee, but it is not a sign of weakness, but rather being humble enough to acknowledge when you need people is actually a sign of strength more than anything else. And very often when we try to break out of isolation and develop strong relationships, I have to say that there are barriers to breaking this isolation. And I've just mentioned one, that fear of vulnerability. You don't want to open up, your fear of being judged or being exposed. My friend says I'm a secret squirrel because I kind of hold things to my chest quite a lot, which, has its perks, but sometimes you kind of need to unburden. It's necessary. There's that stigma and shame that comes with, feeling like you're asking for help, especially if you're in cultures where it is emphasized that being self-reliant is a value, Sometimes we're afraid of burdening other people. Sometimes issues in our minds get so magnified that the idea of sharing with other people just like, you're not really interested in doing that. You don't really want to push your problems on other people, which I totally understand as well. And again, social anxiety, we don't want to be perceived in a negative light or be rejected. Some of us have been through situations where we've shared with other people what we're going through and we heard other people talk about it, we were betrayed or rejected, and then We build walls around ourselves. Can I just say though, as someone who has built walls before, building walls is understandable, but it's not right. I'm just going to put it out there. And sometimes when we have a small network of people, it can be hard to share sometimes. And sometimes we have to step out to other people. For example, a mentor who may not be in our, or someone older, for example, who may not be in our immediate sphere. And again, I just want to emphasize that sometimes when we have had really negative experiences in the past, it can really put us off. But again, it's no excuse, because the Lord doesn't put conditions on, bearing up with one another's burdens. That is the command right there. So the truth again is that relationships, to build them to be strong and healthy, takes effort and intentionality, very much like our spiritual life, and investing time and care into relationships is how they grow and strengthened. And I have to say, I'm telling and encouraging us to obviously come out of isolation and find community. It's important to be led by the Lord to the right people, obviously. And I have to say, just because God leads you to people doesn't mean that they won't let you down sometimes. I know I've let people down, so I'm in no position to sit on a high horse and point out to other people. We all have weaknesses, and sometimes we've been the betrayer, even if it's a little way. So it's just important that we bear that in mind. So be led by the Lord to the right people, and follow Him when He's asking you to share with other people. I think that's the best way to do life, quite frankly. So open communication and vulnerability, we can't run away from it. If you want to build strong relationships, it's just the way it's going to be. And this is especially true, I think, when it comes to being in a relationship with our spouses. You can only hide for so long, because sometimes, and I was saying this to my husband the other day, sometimes holding on to the secret becomes the very thing that destroys the relationship rather than the thing itself, because we weren't really built for that. There's something about when you're living in duplicity, it really grates at you, and it really, it's not good for one's conscience. And vulnerability and openness is really massive. So just a reminder again that, God is really big on community. And one of the scriptures I wanted to share was from Proverbs 27:17, where it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. So for you to grow, for you to become the best version of yourself, you do need community. You do need people around you that will call out the gold in you, and sometimes call out the crap that you're letting out. And that's okay too. So, thank you guys. We're going to wrap up right here, but I hope I have convinced you that when it comes to managing stress and actually your mental health in general, community and support are not really negotiable. They are essential. And I just want to highlight once again that isolation and loneliness right now is a public health issue. And it's something that I really think should not even be mentioned in the church, because church is family. We're meant to be there for one another, right? And we are designed for community. We're built for connection. So let's live according to God's design and be the best version of ourselves. I want to encourage you guys, man, reach out to communities and be a support to others too, God has called us to share burdens with one another. I have to say that my experience is that I have a long way to go in terms of allowing vulnerability to be truly expressed in my life. But I know that, from my experience, God is probably the most vulnerable being there is. He gives without guarantee of return. He kind of lays his heart bare, and I believe he's calling us to that life where we allow ourselves to be fully seen, and it's in that place of vulnerability that we can receive the greatest love and greatest support, because yeah, our needs are truly, out there, and they are met. So I'm going to close out our episode today with a verse from Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2. And the TPT version says, "Love empowers us to fulfill the law of the Anointed One as we carry each other's troubles. If you think you are somebody too important to stoop down to help another when you really are not, you are living in deception." Ouch, I felt that. So guys, I want to remind you that it's not just about helping, but also being helped. And as we do that, we live out God's design for community, and we can really travel light as we navigate this journey called life together. So thank you again for joining in. I hope you guys have been richly blessed. We're going to continue our chat about stress in the next episode, talking about changes. So make sure you tune in. And till then, guys, continue to travel light. I will see you next week. Ta-da.